Hi, today I have Professor Lav Varshney on the show. He's a professor at University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, and he has done his master's and PhD from MIT, and also got a thesis award.
Excited to talk to you about technology and business and policy and all kinds of things.
People are going crazy about generative AI these days, right? And you did this work many years ago.
Yes, this was back in 2011, 2012, so this was very much before the deep learning revolution. And so we built this technology for generating flavorful and novel culinary recipes because it's quite scientific. It's something that people can relate to very easily. You know, everyone eats. And we use that to pretty significant impact. It was more than $100 million of impact for IBM.
They do a lot of generative stuff. And there are two views which are emerging, right? One is that they are so powerful.
I actually worked on large language models myself when I was at Salesforce back in 2019. And we open source released the first billion parameter plus model at the time. Arguably much better than GPT-2 at the time.
Can you give a few examples or thought experiments of how you think AI can reduce well-being, right? So you made this argument about the triad of where autonomy was one of the pieces of the triad. So how could our audience understand in thinking about
what would I have done without the technology and what did I do with the technology? And if they diverge a lot, then there seems to have been some loss of autonomy.
On AI safety. Mm-hmm. So can you talk a little bit more about how regulation should be thought of, right, when we're thinking about AI? I have Lav Varshney on our show. Lav Varshney is a professor at University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, the same university where my father did his PhD, so it's specifically close to my heart. He did his master's and PhD at MIT, the same school I went to do my master's and PhD, but dropped out after my master's and didn't complete my PhD. And Lav has done a lot of great things, just starting from MIT itself, where he got an award for his thesis. He has been a researcher at IBM Research, where he did a very interesting project around building recipes using AI, and we'll talk more about it today. He has also spent time at Salesforce as a principal research scientist and looked at interesting theoretical questions in AI out there. And most recently, he was a White House fellow, right? And he will also tell us on this show how much time he spent with the president and how he spent that time. So with this, I'd like to welcome Lav Varshney to the show. Lav, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Varun, for having me, and I'm excited to discuss all these different topics, and I'll try to be as compelling as coffee with Karan.
Excellent. So let's get into the first question.
All right.
Right, and people are going crazy about generative AI these days, right? And you did this work many years ago, where you had used generative AI in recipes and doing interesting kind of food. So tell us a little more about what did this technology do?
Yeah, so this was back in 2011, 2012. So this was very much before the deep learning revolution. And so we built this technology for generating flavorful and novel culinary recipes, which is a really great area to work in because it's quite scientific. It's something that people can relate to very easily. You know, everyone eats at least 2 or 3 times a day. Yeah. And also, it's more than 10% of the world economy. So even small impacts can be quite huge. And so what we did was we developed some algorithmic ideas around generation, but then also about selection. I think people don't recognize that in creativity, a billion ideas is actually not so useful. 3 ideas that are very good are much more useful. And so we were able to draw on ideas from the psychophysics of flavor perception, as well as the chemistry of food and perception of surprise and so on, to be able to predict which recipe ideas will be the most compelling. And we used that to pretty significant impact. It was more than $100 million of impact for IBM. There's all kinds of foods that are sold in grocery stores that were developed using the technology. To take an example, McCormick, their spice mixes, many of them were developed using this Chef Watson technology. And another interesting example is with Bare Naked granola. They used it for fan engagement. So one could design recipes directly on their website using Chef Watson, and then those granola recipes would be delivered to your door. So really a nice way to activate a market.
That sounds pretty amazing. And did you taste some of the food which it
we used to do a lot of those. And in fact, my wife Nina and I, we served one of the desserts from the system at our wedding reception.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so a Caymanian plantain dessert, which had a banana cream layer, orange and papaya layer with cayenne pepper, and then plantain chips.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah.
Excellent. So let's come from this love to all the generative AI which is happening in the world, right? And it's interesting, this new technology, which is these large language models, right? And they do a lot of generative stuff. And there are two views which are emerging, right? One is that they are so powerful, and this one single model can do so many different tasks effectively, for which we have to build a different model each time, right? So that's really, really powerful. Even people within the AI community didn't see that such a technology would come. But on the other hand, these are, not controllable. They hallucinate. It almost looks like a brute force approach to AI, right? Where you just stuff a lot of data in a very large network, which predicts, right? And it solves very complex problems, but then would make mistakes which a 4-year-old would probably, or a 5-year-old would not make. So, what is your view on this technology? Do you think it's an off ramp, or do you think this is the way AI will go and develop in the next few years?
Yeah, so I actually worked on large language models myself when I was at Salesforce back in 2019, and we open source released the first billion parameter plus model at the time, arguably much better than GPT-2 at the time, in fact. So I've been thinking about these things for quite a while, and the progress has been just amazing. And I think I was serving in Washington when ChatGPT came out, and it gained a lot of attention, and I think rightfully so. I mean, the linguistic fluency that these systems have, and some of the capabilities that they're able to display in terms of emergence of reasoning and so on. It is actually quite amazing that just based on prediction of the next token, you can get all these capabilities. In fact, some of my students and I recently showed that one can prove that the transformer architecture is a universal predictor in the information theoretic sense, which actually provides some reason why these architectures seem to work for all the different domains.
I see.
And so so there's definitely all these pluses. Like you mentioned, there are also some negatives, hallucination being one. And in fact, there's a fundamental tension between creativity and safety.
Yeah.
So the more safe, the more guardrails you put in, the more you control the hallucinations, the more banal, the more less creative the outputs end up being. And so based on the application domain, you want to maybe shape where things go. And to your broader point, I think there is some plateauing happening. I think it's getting harder and harder to improve these systems. In part because of data scarcity. I mean, we've already used all the data we have in some sense. And I think there's a reason why GPT-5 hasn't come out, right? It's been quite a while since GPT-4 came out. And in fact, one can make some information theoretic arguments that demonstrate that as you get closer and closer to the Shannon theoretic limits of predicting language, the harder and harder it'll be. So I think there is some plateauing happening, but I think these approaches will definitely be a key component of larger AI systems that compose different models, that compose knowledge-driven techniques, that compose more human interpretable techniques. So bringing all of those together, I think, will be the path forward.
Sure.
But these large AI models are definitely one piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, fair enough. And I think my take back from that is that definitely we can do a lot more with these models, right? And as you said, that depending on the task, whether we want to prioritize creativity or predictability, you can do different things with it. But we should not lose sight of newer techniques, which can be more human interpretable, controllable, and so on and so forth. So, Lav, you mentioned the word safety in between, right, when you were talking about this, right? So, tell me a little more that what do you mean by AI safety and privacy, right? And I know we have talked about this before, but you have also written about this. So, what is really AI safety and privacy, and is it mostly about what a lot of people are scared about, that this AI will become into a monster and it will dominate humans with all the sci-fi movies we see, or is it something which is more now and here?
Yeah, so I think there's a variety of questions in this broad space of AI safety and ethics. So there's been a lot of kind of public public discussions around existential risk, that these AI models might get uncontrollable, they might enable bioweapons or chemical weapons, they might cause the information environment to become completely insecure, so no one knows what is true anymore. And I think these are relatively valid concerns, but I think these are quite far off. And it seems to me that the more immediate concerns are when we're deploying AI in areas like critical infrastructure. So when you're deploying AI and building a wastewater treatment plant, you want to make sure that it's not having data poisoning or other issues such that you cause a cholera epidemic or you damage the environment. If you're deploying it in bridges, you want to make sure that the smart sensors are not leading to unnecessary repairs on the one hand, but also not predicting bridge failures, which can cause loss of life. So it feels to me that critical infrastructure is kind of a very immediate setting in which AI safety is very important. And then a related point is when AI is used in settings like human resources. So when you're doing hiring decisions or police usage or judicial decisions, very important areas in which AI is starting to be used. Again, one wants to ensure fairness and other kind of trust-based properties. And if we can have that, I think kind of all these three broad areas, whether it's existential risk, critical infrastructure, or societal applications, I think we want to ensure a broad notion of trust. Whether it's kind of fairness, whether it's lack of hallucinations, whether it's kind of human understandability. So I think we want to bring all of that together.
Got it. And what are your views on some of the ways we can make AI safe, right? Is it doing different kinds of models or using these models in a specific way, or there are more layers on top of these models to ensure that?
Yeah, so I think the way I think of it is that there's kind of an AI triad that people typically talk about. There's compute, there's data, and there's algorithms and human cleverness. But I think there's a second AI triad, which involves DevOps, MLOps, and cybersecurity. And I think actually that further triad is actually quite important for ensuring that systems are safe and secure. So we want to ensure the larger software in which these are embedded are safe through DevOps. We want to ensure that the ML and AI algorithms themselves are working well and they're not subject to drift or other problems. And then we want to ensure that the larger infrastructure in which they're embedded is safe and secure through cybersecurity. So putting all those together, I think, can be quite compelling.
Cool, very cool. And this would be very good advice for entrepreneurs, right, who are building a lot of use cases and applications of AI, right? And I think not only from a point of view of safe AI, but delivering consistent and reliable customer value is something this can help in, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think especially in the enterprise context, having that trust is very important. No one wants to use an AI that's unreliable. And I think demonstrating that trust is the key to diffusion of these AI technologies across nearly all industrial sectors. Without that trust, if there's still fear, if there's still uncertainty about how they'll perform, if there's still a feeling that you always need human oversight, then there won't be any productivity benefits.
Sure.
And yet these technologies are so powerful that they can impact nearly every sector. So we should really aim for them.
Can you, Lav, give a few examples or thought experiments of how you think AI can reduce well-being, right? So you made this argument about the triad of where autonomy was one of the pieces of the triad. So how could our audience understand in thinking about AI decreasing autonomy leading to lower well-being?
Yeah. So suppose I'm I'm writing something and I'm using a chatbot. And so, I start writing something, but then I use the chatbot and it changes the argument I was going to make. So now it's different than what I would have done without the technology. And so there seems to have been some loss of autonomy. Right? And you can think of a lot of these settings where, like the counterfactual, like what would I have done without the technology and what did I do with the technology? And if they diverge a lot, then there seems to have been some loss of autonomy. I'm not acting as I would have otherwise. But the difficulty is often you don't know what you would have done in advance. And so it's hard to know when you have lost autonomy. And that's actually especially pernicious because these technologies become so ingrained in your cognition that you don't even know that you've lost the autonomy.
Exactly. No, and we'll come back to this because it's a very interesting point. We've also talked about AI, which is not black box AI, right? Like the AI we have today, it's non-interpretable, non-controllable, and so on and so forth. So, and I also know that you're doing a very interesting startup, right, called Kokri. Is that the right pronunciation?
Yeah, Kokri,
right, which is into music creation. Right. And you don't use the black box kind of AI techniques for this music creation, right? So can you tell us a little bit more about what this startup is doing and how is it different from if we were doing the same stuff using an LLM or a voice-to-voice kind of model?
Sure. So let me start with the company. So what we're building is a music co-creativity platform and a world in which you can do composition. And the basic idea is that we want to lower the bar to creativity and yet have strong human engagement and human fun. So we're focused not just on the product of creativity, the songs themselves, but the process of creativity, which is very human engaging. And in fact, we want to drive well-being through that. And so the basic idea is we want to take music and decompose it into pieces, abstract pieces of harmony, rhythm, melody, which in the classical Indian system you could think of as tal and rag and so on. And so we have these pieces, and then we want to compose songs from those. And so this is much easier than note-by-note composition in the Western tradition, which requires a fair bit of knowledge and training. And so you can have kind of your dream in your head of kind of the music you want. You can participate as a human very strongly, and then get the muons. We call these abstract pieces as muons, and then do muon decomposition from existing songs, or you can compose your own muons, and then do muon fusion to create the new songs.
Very cool. So it is almost like Lego blocks.
Exactly.
Music, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's very much like music Lego bricks, and you're constructing from that rather than from the raw atoms of stuff.
Yeah.
And we've seen that it is very engaging. So we did some trials at Stanford University, and I think the number was 46% of the students used our technology kind of half or more of their free time.
Oh.
So really large amounts of engagement, and the quality of the songs. This was literally their first composition, and yet it was really, really good songs. And coming back to weddings, actually, so my sister-in-law recently got married, and so we composed a song for her wedding. And her husband is Jewish, actually, so it had kind of Indian elements and Jewish elements,
nice.
And it was like a really fun song that both sides of the wedding party appreciated.
Very cool.
So,
and this can even make a person who may not have been a composer if this technology did not exist, right? Because it's just democratizing the ability to compose music.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So it democratizes the ability to compose, and then is also very engaging, and the humans are very fundamentally involved. They're authentic. And another key point is that the intellectual property is controlled by the user.
Yeah.
So a lot of current large language model and related approaches, they'll scrape and steal the whole internet, and so it's not right, and it's not legal, and so.
Right.
The core technology that we're drawing on, that was developed in my group, Haizi Yu, who was my co-founder at the company and my former PhD student. So he developed this technique called information lattice learning, which is a white box AI, which is trained just on 300 chorales by Johann Sebastian Bach, which have been public domain for hundreds of years. And so the Bach chorales are used to learn kind of the laws of music theory. And in fact, we can recover the laws of music theory in the same human interpretable form as a music theory textbook. So there's the knowledge discovery, and the basic idea is you're looking for symmetries, for group theoretic invariances, and so you have perfect explanations for everything you discover.
I see.
So it's this symmetry or that symmetry, and further there's a hierarchical structure. So there's this lattice that tells you this concept is built on this other concept, and so on. So you can discover the knowledge, and then when you do composition, you go down the lattice to decompose, and then you go up the lattice to recompose.
Right. So interestingly, if I understand it right, and this has been one of my problems with large language models, is that you have some representation of knowledge here, right? As to saying that, and that's how humans even do language, right? So we have a symbolic construction of meaning and explaining and being able to explain why we understood something in a way, or why did we infer something in a way. Is it correct to say that that's the same process here you are trying to do with music, and that's why there's even value to the representation which you have come up with to to put out how music really is?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the technology is so powerful that the same basic lattice structure can learn laws in not just music, but in chemistry and in biology, like in single-cell RNA sequencing data and quantum optics. So we're very excited about the core technology as perhaps a different route to artificial general intelligence as well. In addition to the specific application we're pursuing in the startup, which is trying to enhance societal well-being through music composition.
Very cool. So this is a very good example for our audience to understand that what could be an alternate path to AGI, which is more based on human interpretable decomposition of a text or music or any of it, and then reconstructing it back, right? So if I was thinking about it in the language context, it would be going from some text to some representation of meaning, and then from that representation of meaning being able to query it to either generate inferences or generate a generative output. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. In fact, linguists, when they talk about things, they talk about syntax and then semantics and pragmatics. And so one way to think about what information lattice learning does is it extracts the semantics, the core meaning of what's going on, and then you can remix at the meaning level, and then realize back at the syntactic level actual realizations. So that's exactly, and in fact, one can demonstrate that information lattice learning achieves the information theory limit of semantic compression, which is also, I mean, for those of us who are theorists, is actually quite compelling.
Very cool, very cool. So moving ahead, Love, we talked about your music startup. Let's talk a little bit about your experience at Salesforce, right? And you talked about it in context of, seeing a large language model coming out of Salesforce. But for our entrepreneurs, right, sales tech and AI in sales is very, very hot right now. What was your experience in seeing AI being applied to the sales process, which is very manual still across the world?
Yeah, in fact, when I was at Salesforce, I focused more on kind of pure AI, not as much connected to the applications.
Got it.
But I mean, I think, sales is a very human process, and kind of creating that resonance with clients is important. But I think the key piece about sales that has been understudied with AI is actually information elicitation. So when you, as a salesperson, when you go into a client, you want to get them talking about their pain points and then dig into that. And some people are very good at this. I'm just thinking back to one of my colleagues, James Jameson, in fact. He was amazing at eliciting pain points and needs from clients. But not everyone is good at this. And so I think one really nice application of AI would be to help regular salespeople to elicit the right information. And that requires kind of adaptation. It may be a reinforcement learning kind of approach, rather than just kind of analyzing the data that comes off of the client, kind of the data exhaust, which is the focus of nearly all AI support for sales.
Sure.
So I think there's a lot of elements to this where AI can play a role. But I don't think anything replaces kind of the human relationship.
Yeah. No, cool. So let me bring a lot of things which we have talked about in a question together for you. And so when the internet first came, right, it was seen as a democratizing technology, right? There was this famous book written, "The World is Flat," right? And since then, we have seen a lot of concentration of power due to the internet, right? And another book which was written a few years back called "The Second Machine Age" talked about how it kind of now is leading to concentration of power. Mm-hmm. Also, what we have seen is that there's data which shows that there's correlation between the rise of social media and rise of depression and suicides among teenagers, right? Mm-hmm. Are we at a similar place with AI, right? A lot of people have started talking about AI and large language models as this democratizing force, right? And making everyone, quote unquote, an expert or capable of doing a lot more things than they were ever able to do before. But in the context, you have also just spoken about well-being, safety, and privacy. Mm-hmm. Do you see a threat that a few years down the line, we'll be in the same place as we are with internet today? And is there an alternate trajectory which is possible if you think that is a possibility?
Right. Yeah. With respect to market concentration, I think the open source community has played a counterweight to that. And I think especially with AI and the neural network approach to it, the models like Llama 3.1, which I think came out yesterday, and others, the control model at Salesforce that we open source released many years ago. I think all of those have had a nice kind of counterweight to the more closed systems, like from OpenAI and Anthropic and others. On the other hand, I think it's a false dichotomy that large language models are the only way towards broad AI. Even support vector machines and random forests are actually quite useful for a lot of settings. Yeah. And those are as democratic as they come. So I think there is some need for thoughtful regulation to control market power. But I think the technology ecosystem itself kind of gives a countervailing force. And then coming to your question about kind of mental health. Yep. I've actually been having some recent conversations with the Office of the Surgeon General in the United States, the top doctor in the United States. And I also spoke at actually a health policy venue recently about this. And it seems to us that if we approach AI and generative AI in particular, the co-cre way, the information lattice way, where the humans are quite engaged and it's fully human controllable, then it might enhance well-being in the ways I described. On the other hand, There's been some recent demonstrations, very early studies. So I mean, I think that's still an open question. But certain forms of generative AI are leading to depression and a lack of motivation by workers. The initial studies have been more in a corporate setting rather than with teenagers. But I think some of the same phenomena that we've seen with social media might arise. But still, many more studies to be done.
Great, understood. Understood. So this is a good segue to a second segment here, Love, which is around AI policy and AI strategy, right? And you have been a White House fellow and thought quite deeply about these topics. So my first question in this segment is that there's now a race going on around the world, right? Where countries are competing to be the number one country in AI, and so are organizations, right? And we see a lot of this mad race happening with building larger and larger LLMs and so on. What is your advice when countries look at their AI strategy? How can countries build distinctive AI competitiveness? And is this rat race the right way of thinking about it?
Yeah, so I think national competitiveness is a way to think about geopolitics, and I think it's a common way to frame it. It's not the only way, but let's take it for the moment. At some point, we can talk about Kautilya and his kind of more network-based view of kind of
Let's
geopolitics.
just do it next.
Yep. So, the way I think about it is technology can be a big source of national power, whether it's on the military side, whether it's with respect to economic strength, with its respect to the strength of communities and societies. So for sure, AI will play a strong role as we go forward. And let me take you back a little bit to the Industrial Revolution, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
And so there was a historian of science, Joseph Needham, who asked the question that why did Europe in particular get ahead during the Industrial Revolution when India and China were ahead for the previous 1,000 years? One of the kind of proposals or answers to Needham's question was proposed by Radham Narasimhan from the Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore. He passed away recently, but his argument is very compelling. So what he was arguing was that the kind of culture and tradition in India was focused too much on computational positivism, as he called it, getting the right answer without having too much deep theory. So if you can compute where the stars are, that's enough. You don't need to have a theory of gravity necessarily. And on the other hand, Newton and others really pushed for kind of a general theory. And so what Narasimhan really argued was a general theory allows you to transfer knowledge from one domain to the next much more easily. And that allows you to take a steam engine, let's say, and transfer it to all the different industrial sectors without having to reinvent so much. My feeling is that there's something similar happening with AI, that if we just are large language model jockeys, we build things just to get the right answer without worrying about its transparency, without understanding what's going on, we might end up in the same situation. And I think that understanding in theory can be a source of national power as we go forward.
Got it.
So, and of course, I mean, other elements like that triad I talked about, compute and people and data are also key contributors to this. But I think kind of the fundamental theories behind where intelligence comes from will allow the deployment of technologies across industrial sectors much more easily than otherwise.
Got it. And how can countries do that? That rather than just chasing LLMs and the right answer, get into more theories of intelligence?
Yeah, I think it's really a epistemic culture or a kind of a culture. So I think one can inculcate this. And I mean, there's historical constraints, but I think one can inculcate a desire to not just do rote memorization, but to really understand. My own training was very much in that direction. My PhD advisors used to really emphasize this, even going back previously in my education. And I think educational systems are really the way we can push these things. So universities and even schools have a strong role to play in this.
Sure. So, Love, another question, right? If you see a lot of AI research today and new AI models coming up, they are being built by the big tech companies, right? Or startups which have raised tens or hundreds of $1 billion, right? Even $1 billion and so on, right? And that's where the new state-of-art SOTA, as we call it, results are coming out. Because if you see traditionally, research has been done in universities. In fact, most of the techniques, including deep learning, which we talk about today, were all invented in the university ecosystem, right? Mm-hmm. So what do you see now as the role of universities, where a lot of new AI and the methods which we have need big compute, that means they need big money, and universities may always not have those kinds of resources. So what's the role of universities, and how do you see it in your own university, which is University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign?
Right. Yeah, so as you mentioned, your father studied there, as did my father and my grandfather before him. So I think Illinois, and I mean, broadly speaking, many universities, we have a role to play in establishing foundational knowledge that can be taken forward by industry. And it's the same here. So to take the example of information lattice learning, ILL, which actually is the first few words of Illini, in case you didn't notice. So ILL actually came out of academic research at the University of Illinois. And so that's something we're pushing now through the startup, and we'll see where it goes. Likewise, developing that deep understanding of the type I was mentioning that is a counterweight to being too computationally positivist, I think is very much the role of the university. I think, furthermore, inculcating kind of social responsibility among our students when they go out into the world is, again, a very strong role for the university, because we can teach ethics, we can teach the right way to do things, we can teach, in a certain sense, we can teach moral values as well. We can give confidence to students as well to go out into the world. So I think there's a broad view of what universities can do. And then more specifically within research, I think we can really work on the core theoretical ideas that then lead to advances once they get into industry.
Sure. So universities definitely, I think this is linked to the answer which you gave me to the last question, right? Which is theoretical knowledge, greater understanding, developing conceptual knowledge, which is more transferable. And I think what you're also saying is a lot more has to be done there as far as AI is concerned. It's not that AI is quote unquote solved.
Yeah, that's right. So like we discussed, I think large neural network techniques are starting to plateau. And so we need to bring in more ideas. And I think universities are well placed to do that. Also, as we want to diffuse knowledge across industrial sectors, again, universities are well placed to do that. So if you think about wastewater treatment or music or food or whatever it is, I think universities can play a bit of a role in training people in other fields to understand AI so that they can take the advances into their industrial and societal sectors. So that's another way. And universities also play a role in consulting. So we can often, as professors and students, we can work with companies to help them use the technology going forward. So, the university is a multifarious thing, and so we can play a variety of roles to advance not just the innovation of AI, but also the diffusion of AI across society, and also training our students as they go out to be trustworthy and innovative and just good people to spread technology.
Great. So we have talked about what countries can do in both creating conceptual and theoretical knowledge around AI. We've also talked about how universities can help in diffusion. Let me talk about the third leg of AI policy, which is regulation, right? Because at one point, there are fears around AI, around job loss, privacy. We have talked about some of these, and fairness and so on, right? At the same time, we don't want innovation to be stifled. And I know that you worked on the executive order from the White House on AI safety. So can you talk a little bit more about how regulation should be thought of, right, when we're thinking about AI, which kind of balances these two goals, right? And any interesting snippets from the executive order itself?
Sure. Yeah. So balancing regulation and innovation, I think, is really the central difficulty in technology policy, because, like you said, national competitiveness and national power comes from innovation, but we want to ensure that the technology is benefiting all sectors of our society, not just the elite, with respect to jobs, with respect to fairness, equitable access to these technologies. So I think that's where existing authorities, for example, in the US, are already present, but the executive order really pushes the departments and agencies to ensure that they're applied. So, for example, labor laws already restrict discrimination on the basis of race and gender, but once AI algorithms are deployed, it's important to make sure that that still is the case. Likewise, with respect to job transformations, it would be helpful if we can help people whose jobs might no longer be as relevant to retrain, to kind of get to jobs that are more important going forward. So that's, again, a place where it's not regulation, but it's really government action in other ways through subsidies and training programs that can be really powerful.
Sure.
And another approach is liability regimes. So government can play a role in establishing the appropriate liability regimes so that if things go bad, that companies are appropriately liable, or the liability is distributed among users and makers and so on. So there's a bunch of these kinds of questions. But the core, I think, aspect of government and state power is really with respect to national security.
Yep.
And so that's where I think some of the nice core elements of the executive order played out. And one can look at related things like in China, they have a similar regulatory regime that's been put in place, the AI Act in Europe. Of course, there's a lot of differences across these geographies, but some of the core ideas around, say, ensuring the safety of critical infrastructure.
Yep.
I think that's something nearly everyone can agree on,
Right.
that we want our bridges and wastewater treatment plants to be safe. So directing departments and agencies to ensure that that is the case, I think is really powerful.
Sure. And I also love of the school of thought, right, when we look at AI regulation, which says that don't regulate the building of technology and building of models and so on, but regulate use cases and applications of technology, because there have been some some legislations around also what size of model can you build and how you have to do disclosures if your model is larger than a given size.
Yeah, so one of the difficulties in AI policy right now is the fact that the mapping between resources and capabilities is unclear. It's still very much an open research question of how this amount of compute or this amount of data or this amount of energy leads to this capability in language or in creativity or in reasoning. In terms of government possibilities, one can't really therefore regulate capabilities. What one can regulate are resources, and that's why things like reporting requirements were put in around resources, like data and compute.
Yep.
And note that it was quite light-handed. I mean, it's just a reporting requirement, so
Yep.
so people know what's going on. It's not a restriction. It's not. There's no penalties, etc. One could have taken a much heavier hand and actually constrained things. That's not the approach that was taken in the US.
Sure.
To contrast that, let's take the AI Act in Europe. So they've established categories of applications.
Yeah.
So for example, anything that's related to what they call social scoring is cast in this high-risk category, and that's essentially outlawed.
Right.
And so that's an application-oriented approach to regulation. But I think that is too heavy-handed and too coarse an approach.
Sure.
Because it stifles innovation. Because you can imagine all kinds of very helpful applications where kind of societal understanding is useful.
Sure. So let's bring all of this together, Love. So you used the framing when we started on geopolitics. So let's go back to the geopolitics of AI. And let me frame it this way, that if we say there are two countries in the world today, which is US and China, where more than 50% of the top AI papers come from, right? Large language models are done by a few companies, mostly in the US. If you see chip design, most of the chip design used today for AI is done again by a couple of companies. Most of them are manufactured in one country, which is Taiwan. So we see immense concentration of power in few pockets in the world, right? And we also see that if you look at how politics has moved over the last decade, it's been more about competition than collaboration, right? And a lot of countries have voted leaders in that way. What does all this mean, right? Just looking at this geopolitics, this race for superiority, at the same time risks with this technology, which is becoming immensely powerful, and also does things which we didn't predict it will do, right? And some even compare it with nuclear technology. And regulation has been light. A lot of regulation has also been light because countries don't want to lose the race of innovation. How do you see all of this? Are we going to a world where we'll see a lot of inequality, probably wars coming up again, people getting left out? Or is there a way to do this safely, reliably, going ahead, right? And it's sometimes easy to say, but because each country makes its own regulation and uses the technology in different way, it is not very clear how globally.
Problem. It's intellectually super interesting, but also practically important, and it'll shape various aspects of the world. Since World War II, we've been in this kind of Pax Americana, as people call it, the American peace, especially since 1991. After the fall of the Soviet Union, there's been kind of this kind of unipolar world. But in the last few years, there's been an emergence of other powers.
Yep.
So whether it's India, China, Russia has retrenched as well, and so on. So I think there has been kind of this growing competition over the years. And I think technology does play some role in it. Of course, there's other factors. And in fact, the way Clausewitz, the international relations theorist, used to describe it, there's all these levers of state power, and countries play them in different ways. So, I mean, I think that's just natural as we move away from that unipolar world after 1991 for competition to increase. But that's not to say that collaboration is not useful. In fact, many would argue that partners and allies are the greatest strength the country has. So, as you might have seen, for example, the G7 initiated the Hiroshima process for AI policy, so bringing together many countries. The president, when he came to India for the G20, also had kind of nice interactions with Prime Minister Modi about emerging technologies and so on. So I think like-minded countries are working together, and it seems to me that respecting human rights is very critical as we go forward. I think building technology that brings the fruits of advancement to all segments of society is important as well. So that's kind of the way I think about it. That we don't want an authoritarian approach to AI to dominate. We want kind of more of a democratic approach to AI to really spread around the world, whether it's in South America or Africa.
Sure. This is a good segue to our next segment, which is around AI in India, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I and you have talked a lot about this topic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let me start by simply talking about the use of AI to further India's development goals, right? Because India is a country which has a lot of capacity issues in solving social issues and giving public service, right? What do you think? Do you see big opportunities which a technology like AI can bring for solving India's problems, be it healthcare, housing, critical infrastructure, education, and so on?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of possibilities. Actually, let me come back to Kautilya, let me come back to Kautilya, the Prime Minister of Chandragupta Maurya. That's right. So he was a pretty clever international relations and domestic policy theorist as well. And so he often used to talk about kind of a networked view of things. And I think that's really critical to how India can advance in AI and more broadly. So advances on the domestic side can play into the international side. Things on kind of development, rural development can impact human resources and capacity building. And so I think many countries approach different policy buckets largely independently. But one can be very strategic in the way that President Eisenhower in the U.S. used to describe it, that you can have one stone that kills many birds in this Kautilya kind of network view. And I think that's really compelling as we push AI forward, because it is a multi-use technology. And to be more specific, I think AI diffusion across sectors, whether it's agriculture or road safety or human resource augmentation. I think in any of these settings, there's huge possibilities in India. When we're in the US, we often say that if something works in India, it'll work everywhere. And so the demonstration at the price points that are appropriate in India, the resilience and the robustness that's needed in India, if you can demonstrate here, it'll work anywhere, like in Africa and South America, even back in the US. If it works in India, it'll definitely work in the US. So that's how we view India. And India has, you were saying that there's limited capacity. In fact, we view it as there's huge amounts of latent capacity. Like it's a sleeping giant, that if there's latent capacity, if it's awoken, then India will be like the core partner one of the core partners going forward.
Sure. No, makes a lot of sense. And just so that we can understand what you mean by this networked approach, right? So one example which you gave was building of technology for Indian use cases, and then that going international, because we built it for India means we have built it for the world, right? Is this correct understanding of what you're calling as the network approach?
That's right. So I mean, take the India stack, the digital identity and digital payment and so on. That's been a big export for India, which has been really compelling. It's privacy preserving, it's democratic in its basic outlook, and it's useful in Africa, South America, and elsewhere.
Sure.
So one can imagine the same things for a lot of AI technologies.
Makes sense. And now let's switch gears a little. What do you think about AI research, right? So I was earlier talking about how US and China controls 50% of papers in top AI conferences, right?
Yeah.
And if you look at India's share, it hovers around 1.5%, right? How should India think about this? Should it give up in this race, or is there a way for it to move ahead in this race?
Yeah. I mean, I think knowledge is knowledge, like wherever it comes from. So I wouldn't always cast it as a race.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things that I've seen over the years in interacting with Indian academics is that there's some tendency either to focus too much on specific problems that are not generalizable. Which is great for startups. I mean, that's how you want to do it. You want to solve specific problems. But if you're an academic, you want as general a result as you can. So I think trying to think through problem finding, as it were, in the academic circles in India can be a little bit broader. So I think that's one suggestion. And of course, not that I'm particularly good at this either, but I think at least having that as an aspiration is good. And then I think the other thing is not to always be a follower. So like just because LLMs are the thing of the day doesn't mean that that's the only approach. So being a contrarian is a way to actually get ahead sometimes. So pursuing other approaches in AI, like the information lattice approach my company is pursuing, is an example. But there's a lot of ideas, and pursuing those is not a bad thing. My colleague Narendra Ahuja, when he from Illinois, when he spent a lot of time in India, he also was setting up kind of a pyramid structure where the IITs can mentor the NITs, can mentor other colleges in terms of research productivity. And I think that's also a very compelling approach, because of course the IITs are world class. Not just in education, as I mean everyone knows, but they do high quality research as well. Likewise, IISc and TIFR. But if one can kind of start to mentor and get higher quality research going in the other colleges, I think that can be very compelling too.
Sure.
So just using the resources that exist to greater utilization, I think, is also a good way to go.
Sure. No, and India has taken contrarian approaches in a lot of areas, right? And some of the times it is a necessity, right? Because we are more than 1 billion people. So approaches which work for other countries don't naturally work for India. So I think that's a good tip out here. What do you think about AI entrepreneurship, right? And I know today you were talking to some of the AI entrepreneurs we have. What would be tips you would like to give to AI entrepreneurs who want to sell to the US, right, and be globally competitive than only building for India?
Yeah, so I mean, I think, like I said, building for India is a good way to start, because if it works in India, it works everywhere. But also be cognizant of the customers. So the U.S. National Science Foundation has kind of this formula for entrepreneurship, tech-based entrepreneurship, where customer discovery and learning quickly what the market needs are is the core of it. And I think sometimes as technologists, and I'm guilty of this as much as anyone, we have this cool idea, but we don't ensure the product market fit as much as we should. And so I think that is very critical. And then also with respect to the technology itself, I think one wants to move as much as one can to higher valued settings. One just doesn't want to be a commodity provider. And so I think one key way to do that, like in AI specifically, is not to just be a AI, like an LLM wrapper, not just be a ChatGPT wrapper, but have kind of core innovations, whether it's respect to the business model or the technology. And if you have kind of core innovation, that creates a nice moat, kind of gives you competitive advantage. So when you're competing in the international market, I think you can stand out. So I think those are all kind of important as we go forward. But again, I'm no expert at this. I think, Varun, you're really much better at entrepreneurship.
No, not at all. So great. Now, love to know a little bit more about you. But the question I'm most excited about asking you first is that how was it to be a White House fellow, right? And if you can tell us some exciting incidents from your fellowship at White House and when you had dinner with the president. I'm just making this up, but tell us a little more about it and make it a little fun for our audience.
Yeah. So I mean, I did meet the president in the Oval Office. No food was served. But,
That's good enough.
He is a genuinely nice person, just like everyone says. President Biden. I mean, he genuinely cared to hear what we had to say and was thoughtful. So I mean, he is a great person, and likewise, many of the leaders in our government and in our country more broadly, they're really great people. And public service itself is actually has a great satisfaction. when you're serving in government, I mean, you are, as one person told me, you are a servant of the sovereign. And in the United States, the sovereign is the people, right? Unlike, say, the UK, where it's a king. But likewise in India, I mean, the sovereign is the people. And so, you're the servant of the people, and, every time you walk through the Secret Service security checkpoint into the gate, I mean, you do feel this responsibility that, you want to act for the good of the country and the world. So it was very satisfying. The West Wing, when you go in, it's much smaller than you would think.
Okay.
Yeah, the White House is actually quite small.
I see.
Yeah, so,
I think in comparison, the Rashtrapati Bhavan here is very, very big.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
So,
100 plus rooms.
Yeah, and in fact, George Washington wanted it that way because he was a president, not a king.
Yeah.
Right, and so every room is used. It's fitting for a democracy to not have a palace, but a small, I mean, relatively small executive mansion.
Yeah.
And in fact, the largest, one of the big buildings in Washington is the Capitol building.
Yeah.
I would argue that's the core of American democracy. And one of the things I got to do was actually climb up onto the roof, like up into the Capitol dome,
Wow.
which you have to actually be accompanied by a member of Congress to do that. So I was lucky enough to do that. So one of the interesting things, if you're ever able to corner a congressman to take you up to the dome, super amazing view. You can see the paintings on the ceiling like right up close, and a lot of fun things we got to do.
So next time I'm in the US, I'll request you to introduce me to the congressman also, so that I can also climb up to the dome.
Yep. Yeah, and overall, I mean, just learned a lot, and policy making is different than research or entrepreneurship. So got exposed to that and was able to contribute, I think, at least a little bit.
Sure. So you're back now from the White House Fellowship. You're back to the university. So what keeps you excited now? What keeps you awake at night, other than your two kids?
Yeah.
What is life like?
Yeah. So I mean, Nina is running a startup company called Answerus, which is doing AI in wastewater, and I help out as well. And so, in fact, today she's in Meerut. She's building the second largest biogas plant in all of India.
Very cool.
Yeah. So I've been helping out with that. Have the music company, and then the kids, and then on the research side. We've been excited to push forward more foundational questions in AI. Like I was saying, I think understanding is super important. So we have some nice questions at the intersection of information theory and artificial intelligence, and also biological intelligence. So I mean, those are the kinds of things I'm curious about. And then of course, trying to rest and improve my own well-being, not just the world's well-being.
Sure.
Because I think if you're worn out, then you can't really do much for the world.
You've described at least 5 things which you are doing, so I don't know where you'll get the time to rest, but I'll believe you if you say so.
Yeah, no, I enjoy sleeping, and watching TV. Some people have hobbies like running marathons.
Yep.
Which is compelling for them, but for me, I enjoy taking it easy.
Okay. But what do you do other than work? Do you have other hobbies, or what do you watch on TV, as you were mentioning?
Yeah, a lot of Paw Patrol with my son these days.
Okay, very cool.
But,
that's very sweet.
Yeah, but I actually like these 1-hour procedural dramas, which they're somewhat formulaic, but you can often predict the ending. But it's nice to see the crime shows and all those.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and strangely enough, I actually like the banter among characters. So the West Wing, when it was on 20, 30 years ago, I used to enjoy that a lot. Who would have imagined that someone like me would actually work in the West Wing?
Sure.
So.
No, it's very cool. So Lav, I think we have covered a lot of ground today, talking about generative AI, what it can do, what it cannot do, the interesting stuff your music company is doing, and then segueing into AI policy and strategy for nations, right? And I think this is a very important topic and probably would remain a very important topic for the decades to come. And to learn about your time at White House with the president, and also talking about India and what India can do in AI, which is also, I believe, and we share that belief, I guess, is that is a big opportunity for India, not only for solving India's problems, but also solving the problems of the world. So I hope that we'll see more India-US collaborative efforts, right, to take AI forward, but not take just AI forward, but take well-being of everyone forward with this technology. With that, thank you so much for spending time with me today. And it was a pleasure hosting you at our office.
Yep. No, thank you so much, Varun, and excited to work together going forward.
Yeah.